Hello everyone, Dr. Nina here. I am recording this video to walk you through the quiz on the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization decision of the Supreme Court from 2022. We're doing this quiz in order to be able to identify relevant points that were used in the argument in support of overturning the Roe versus Wade decision from 1973. So without further ado, I will open the quiz and I will walk you through the correct answers by identifying where in the text of the decision you can find the correct answers. Question 1, according to the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, what are the compelling interests of a state that justify the prohibition of abortion? If you don't remember quite as much as what they said, you can go back to the text and get to the later part of the document. And here in this paragraph, you're going to see all of the reasons that they listed. So here you see respect for and preservation of prenatal life at all stages of development, the protection of maternal health and safety, the elimination of particularly gruesome or barbaric medical procedures, the preservation of the integrity of the medical profession, the mitigation of fetal pain, and the prevention of discrimination on the basis of race, sex, or disability. So we're going to see that all of these possible answers that I made available are actually listed in the Supreme Court's decision. Question number 2, according to the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson, what is the stage of viability now in the 21st century? So remember, they were discussing the advancements in medicine that have occurred only recently, with which the stage of viability has already gone quite significantly down from what was considered to be a stage of viability centuries ago. And this is where that is discussed in this line where they say today respondents draw the line at 23 or 24 weeks. So the stage of viability nowadays could be the time of the 23rd or the 24th week of pregnancy. Question number 3, according to the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson, what is the problem with viability as a criterion for the moral permissibility of abortion? So remember that viability was supposed to show us that when a pregnancy is terminated, if the entity that comes out of the woman's womb is capable of independent life, then we consider that to be a person, and then we consider that person to be entitled to protection, to be entitled to the right to life. So what the decision in Dobbs versus Jackson depends on is pointing out that the survival of that prematurely born baby would depend not only on what the features of the fetus were in the womb, but also what is the environment in which it is going to be brought up. So are you going to have a facility that can provide adequate care for a very premature baby and all kinds of procedures that may be necessary? If that's the case, then in some parts of the world, some facilities would be able to make sure that this prematurely born baby survives, but in other parts of the world, that simply is not going to be the case. So what the Supreme Court is referring to here is that lack of strict identification of the features of the fetus itself that are going to identify where viability begins, because one and the same fetus delivered in one location or another may survive or not, depending on things that have nothing to do with its makeup, with its biological makeup. So this is a point that they're making as a crucial point to overturn viability as the relevant point at which abortion should not be allowed. And now let's see where exactly they say that. So you can see it in this paragraph here. Viability also depends on the quality of the available medical facilities. Thus, a 24-week-old fetus may be viable if a woman gives birth in a city with hospitals that provide advanced care for very premature babies. But if the woman travels to a remote area far from any such hospital, the fetus may no longer be viable. So how can that depend on location? Early on, they had also referred again to viability here. The most obvious problem with any such argument is that viability is heavily dependent on factors that have nothing to do with the characteristics of the fetus. So what they're claiming is that this criterion is not at all biologically determined. It depends on so many other things that you can't really draw a certain line. Question number 4. According to the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson, what was the stage of viability in 1973 when Roe versus Wade was decided? Let's get back to the text and see where they were discussing that. So here you're going to see that they're referring to the Roe versus Wade decision, and they say when Roe was decided, viability was gauged at roughly 28 weeks. So the correct answer here is going to be 28 weeks. And I'm asking you this question because I really want you to compare what they're saying here to what was really said in Roe versus Wade. So let me then go up to this question. So here's the question that will require comparing what this decision was saying about Roe versus Wade to what was actually said in Roe versus Wade. So now we're going to switch and go to that decision, and we're going to look up what exactly was said here. So here you see that in Roe versus Wade, what the court actually claims is that viability is usually placed at about 7 months or 28 weeks, like the other case is pointing out, but may occur earlier, even at 24 weeks. So I wanted to point that out because this shows you a little bit of an inconsistency or inaccuracy, strictly speaking, inaccuracy in the citation that was provided in Dobbs versus Jackson as far as Roe was concerned. So now we know that the recent court actually made a mistake here with that claim. So let's get back to the quiz, and we're going to click on E because that's what actually was said in Roe versus Wade. Question 5. According to the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson, what is the determining factor of viability? The support network of the woman, they do not refer to that. The quality of the medical facilities in a given geographical location, certainly they're referring to that. The state of neonatal care at a particular point in time, that's certainly something they pointed out. So let's see where in the text these two factors are mentioned. When we go back and we're going to see that on top of page 52, neonatal care at a particular point in time as mentioned, and further down the same page, quality of the available medical facilities. So both of these factors are what makes viability a very different criterion than strictly biological criterion. That's why it's so hard to consider it a straightforward criterion where to draw a line for when abortion is permissible and when it already is a violation of a fetus's right to life. Question 7, what is the gestational age after which the Mississippi's Gestational Age Act prohibits abortion except in cases of medical emergency or severe fetal abnormality? If we refer back to the document of the decision, we're going to see it here on page 78. The law actually states that if the probable gestational age of an unborn human being has been determined to be greater than 15 weeks. So this is the line at which the Mississippi law prohibits abortion. 15. And then we're going to the next question. According to the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson, what was the stage of viability in the 19th century? At this point in the 19th century, a fetus may not have been viable until the 32nd or the 33rd week of pregnancy. So we see that's quite late in the pregnancy. These days, we would certainly consider that abortion close to those dates is going to be considered birth more so than termination of pregnancy. So there will be an actual baby that will be born at this stage. And certainly medicine is at a stage where that baby would be viable and would be entitled to protection and care. So that's it. I'll wrap this video up. I hope it was helpful to you to go over all of these cases and analyze what exactly was said in the argument. So this hopefully is going to help you decide which of these arguments is stronger so you can use that in your journals.